First meeting of the ADR. First, we'll go around and the ADR members will just say who they are so the people in the waiting room can know who the ADR members are, and then we will move on. I am Mark Kruchnet, a Ross resident and ADR member.
Mark Fritz, ADR member, also Ross resident.
Joey Buckingham.
Are you going or am I going, Joey? So
I don't.
you want to go? You go.
You go. You go.
Okay. So my name is Dan Winey. I've been a Ross resident for about 35 years, and I think and an architect, and I think on ADR since the very beginning.
Oh, I'm next. And I'm Joey Buckingham, and I have lived in Ross since 1992. And I have been on the ADR since the very beginning, and I am a designer.
Okay, the first order of business, as always, is open time for public comments. If anybody in the waiting room wishes to speak about anything that is not on the agenda for tonight for up to 3 minutes, they're welcome to do so. And if we don't have any takers, I'll just explain the process. As we bring an item up, the design team and/or owners of the project do a presentation immediately after the town has spoken a little bit about the project. I then bring it, the ADR has questions often for the design team. After all of our questions are answered, we open it up to the public, and anyone in the public can comment on the project for up to 3 minutes. We try to keep it relatively brief while wanting to listen to all of your concerns. I know there are a lot of people who wrote in about the Poplar project, and we don't want to repeat what other people say, but certainly we want to hear your comments. And at the end of that, I bring it back to the ADR for our recommendations to the town council. And the first project is actually old business, the Tracy residence at 33 Bolinas Avenue, which we looked at last time and has now come back to us with some major revisions.
Thank you, Chair and ADR group members, Planner Matthew Weintraub. The project is the Tracy residence at 33 Bolinas Avenue. Andrew Rogers is the architect and the applicant. The project proposes to lift the existing residence by 5 feet in its current location in order to elevate the habitable space out of the floodplain. This is the second ADR group review of the project. At the June 16th meeting, the ADR group reviewed the project and provided design recommendations. The ADR group advised the applicant to submit a revised project design before providing a recommendation to the town council. The applicant considered the ADR group's recommendations and has submitted a revised project design for ADR group review, including the most current version, which was transmitted this afternoon to the ADR group members. The applicant has also provided an updated neighborhood outreach description, which was transmitted as late mail. Staff has received no public comments on the project. The currently proposed design would require a variance to construct new entry steps within the front yard setback, a nonconformity permit to alter a structure with existing nonconforming setbacks, floor area, lot coverage, and off-street parking, and design review to increase the height of an existing building roof. Staff is seeking the ADR group's recommendation regarding the consistency of the proposed project design with the intent and criteria of design review. To assist in the ADR group's discussion and deliberation, staff has included specific design review criteria and standards relevant to the project in the staff report. Staff will forward the ADR group's recommendation to the town council for consideration at the time the application is heard by the town council. This concludes my introduction to the project. I'm available to answer questions of the ADR group members.
Thank you. Do you want to let the design team in so they can present?
I've just made Andy a co-host, so if he's the one that's going to be presenting, he can unmute himself and share screen. And do we have anyone else? If you could raise your hand if you're from the applicant team for 33 Bolinas, I can go ahead and unmute you.
I believe my client, Libby, might be present. I'm not sure. But why don't I go ahead and present if that's okay?
Yeah, Adam and Libby are here.
And Libby, you're unmuted, so you can speak if you'd like as well.
Okay. I'm going to let Andy speak.
Am I on? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
On and we can
hear
all
you.
hear
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you for rehearing our project. And I wanted to just review the changes that we made since we last met. They were directly in response to comments from you all and also feedback that we received from some of the neighbors that we met with. We took another look at the whole project and the overall floor plan, and we did make a decision to flip the first floor and the second floor. In other words, when we previously met, the living spaces were all on the upper level, and that's the way the house had been for a long time. And the bedrooms are on the lower level. And we decided that it made more sense to put the living spaces on the lower level and the bedrooms on the upper level. And that created a much better connection between the living spaces and the backyard and the pool. It also allowed us to greatly reduce the size of the south-facing deck, which is something that we heard about from you all, but more specifically from the neighbors. And because that deck is now on the bedroom level, we cut it in half, essentially. It was previously 12 feet deep, and now it's 6 feet deep. And we've also brought it back quite a bit from the west side. And instead of having a straight run stair, we've replaced that with a spiral stair, which takes up a lot less space. And effectively, that stair will just be an egress stair. I don't think it will get used very often at all. In the front of the house, we decided to change the location of the front doors so that it was no longer facing the side yard. It's now facing the street. And we created a pretty long front porch that runs the full length of the house, which we think is a lot more friendly toward the street, and it breaks up the mass from what we had previously. We also reconfigured some of the windows and the window pattern and introduced a new front door with side lights. And instead of having a stucco base on the house, we've decided to go with a brick veneer on all four sides. We did share this revised plan with both of the neighbors that we had met with previously, and both of them were supportive. We were able to accomplish this without the building itself encroaching into the front yard, but we couldn't make it work without the entry stair encroaching minimally into the front yard. So that does require a variance. That is pretty much it. I don't know if Libby, you want to add anything, but we're pretty happy with how the design shaped up. We think it's better. We think it's better for Libby and Adam. We think it's better for the neighbors, and we also think the house just has a much better street presence than it did previously. Thank you.
Does anyone in the ADR have any questions, or would you like any of the drawings put up on the screen? I believe that Matthew could do that for anyone who wants that as we discuss it.
I think it'd be worthy of pulling up the site plan if we, just as a reference.
Yeah, if you could put Mark, if you could put the site plan up. I did have one question about how much excavation are we actually doing under the house? The house is being raised, obviously above the floodplain. Is it basically that 5 foot, 5.5 feet, is that the entire amount, or is there additional excavation below?
There's really going to be no excavation required at all because the existing first floor is a slab on grade. So that's pretty much, we're pretty much going to remove the entire foundation and the first floor walls and lift the house and build a new foundation. Site plan should be the next drawing, I believe, the next sheet. Yeah, there we go.
Dan, is you're the one person here from the ADR who didn't see the project last time? Would you
Yeah,
like to go first or last?
Mark, I saw it last. I saw part of it. I didn't see. Is this the first time or the second time it's actually been brought forward?
Second time.
Second.
Yeah. Yep. I did see it the first time.
I do have one question. I'm not sure if I asked last time. Do we have a location for the pool equipment that is identified on this site plan, or you can just point to? Andy?
We do have a location, and it's right in this corner. Is my cursor showing up here? It's in what would basically be the southeast corner of the.
Southeast corner. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
and how is it treated, the pool equipment?
It's in an enclosure. And I have to say, I don't know a whole lot about it because the landscape architect, that's kind of been her thing. But I do know that it's in an enclosure, and I believe that it's the enclosure is helping to quiet or keep the noise from traveling too far. But I don't have more specifics on that.
Okay, and is that the location of the existing pool equipment, or is it being moved?
No, that's a new location. It was previously located at the south end of the house on the first floor.
Okay. And then one other question from me, Andy. One of the things I think we sometimes skip is fencing, how this will address the street with regards to fence or front yard, of visibility. I'm just concerned. I'm interested to know if you've thought that through yet, or are you going to stick with kind of what's there existing as far as the fencing and vegetation in the front of the home?
It's definitely going to get changed because we're changing the location, or we would like to change the location of the parking, the on-street, the off-street parking, and that's going to necessitate a curb cut shift and a new gate out front. But I have not looked at anything as far as that goes yet. And I think that's probably going to be something that's more that the landscape architect is dealing with.
But just to jump in, there's also a bomb shelter that's out in the front that we plan on getting rid of.
I'm sorry, a what?
A bomb shelter in the front.
Yes, exactly.
That we plan on getting rid of. So the front is definitely going to change.
I think you should keep it.
You wouldn't believe, we don't know there might be eels and more eels and sharks down in this thing. Nobody's been down there since 1960. So getting rid of that whole, it's pretty ugly in the front. We'll definitely change the front appearance.
Okay. That's not a coronavirus shelter right now?
It is. We have coronavirus down there. It's probably where it started, actually, but
So just in I know we'll get to comments later. I'll address the front, public visibility later. So I don't have any other further questions, Mark.
Okay. Dan or Joey, do you have any questions?
What is the minimum you have to raise that house per FEMA standards as opposed to the 5 feet you're planning on raising it?
I believe, Joey, that it's 4 feet out of that 5 feet.
Okay.
And the additional 1 foot we were proposing so that we could get a 9-foot ceiling on the lower level.
Okay.
And so we're 1 foot away from the maximum allowable height at this point.
Andy, could you show, if this is your screen, it might be Matthew's controlling it. Who's ever controlling it? Could we see the front facade of the house? Great. The north elevation, thanks. We have to put that on. And then, sorry, could you switch to the south elevation? And then I do have a question on the south elevation. So as the upper deck has evolved and changed, you have the staircase down for egress. Is that fire code?
Does it meet code? I believe that we need, I believe we need a special permission for that spiral to be considered an egress stair.
I guess I'm wondering, is it something that Libby and Adam want to have that staircase down? Because obviously most second story bedrooms have the windows for egress, but not an actual staircase leading out of them. And so I was wondering, you know, before it was, because it was going to be used and it was near the main living areas, now that it's for the bedrooms, I'm wondering if the staircase still serves a purpose that Adam and Libby are interested in. Or is it just there as sort of a leftover because there had been one before?
I actually had the same question. Is that considered a second means of egress as required, or is that something that's a desired egress?
I think it's probably the latter, Joey. I'm not 100% sure whether it's a required second means of egress or not, but I think that there's...
Joe, it shouldn't be required as a second means of egress in a single family home.
But I think there was
have windows in each one of the rooms, which you do.
Right.
It really isn't necessary as a means of egress.
Got it. I think there was more peace of mind for Adam and Libby to have a second way out of the upper level without it being the bedroom egress window.
Because as a general rule, you know, it of course by law and for safety, you want an egress out of every bedroom, which is usually just a window with no deck. But if you have a deck, that's just an extra area to hang out on in the horrible situation if there ever was a fire. But I would say that 99% of homes that have second story bedrooms in Ross do not have a staircase, exterior staircase leading out of the bedrooms.
Well, I can certainly ask Libby and Adam if it's something, you know, how important it is to them.
Okay. Dan, do you have any questions?
No, I didn't have any questions. I had a lot of comments. Why don't we wait till we go through the questions and then we can go ahead.
So if all the ADR members are through their questions, I'll open it up to the public if anybody has any questions. If not, the ADR members now are free to make their comments. Dan, why don't you go first?
Well, yeah, let me just some general comments. I think the front elevation is really quite nice. I think that the addition of the porch, the proportion of the columns, the articulation of the windows is actually quite good. I still, this is a general concern, is that, you know, we're moving the building up by about 5 feet. And if you look at the bottom elevation versus the top elevation, you can see how much more massing it gives the building and how the house now sits on a pretty big base. I think the original drawings I looked at, I wasn't quite sure whether they're concrete. Sounds like what you submitted is brick. Is it a full brick or is it a sticker brick? Is it like a brick veneer?
I think it's probably going to be a brick veneer, is my sense.
Yeah, I think if there's any way, I mean, my general feeling would be, I know you got it up 5 feet to be able to get the 9-foot ceiling. I understand exactly what you guys are looking for. My feeling would be to keep it at 4 feet, but if ADR in general is more comfortable with keeping it 5 feet, then there's a couple moves that I would make. One would be that I would take where you have that bottom board beneath the porch, I would actually, it looks like it's probably about a 1x8, something like that fascia board.
Yeah.
I would beef that up.
Yeah.
I might even beef it up and break it with a molding so that you've got probably somewhere around 12 to 16 inches so that you're seeing less brick.
Yep.
And you're seeing more of a wood base on the front elevation. I think that would actually soften it quite a bit. So it's a simple move that would be just adding another layer of detail that would hopefully bring the height down slightly.
Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah.
So do you want me to go through all my comments, Mark, first?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so let's flip to the next elevation. I think the next one is the west elevation. So just a couple of comments here. One is that, actually go back to the last elevation first, please. So in this elevation, you show an articulated window with a full light below on the upper portion and upper and lower portion, which is really nice. And then if you go to the next elevation, it seems to me that you don't need to make every single one of these windows exactly the same. I don't have a problem with some being fully broken up with lights, but it seems to me that maybe the larger windows, what you might want to consider doing is to go to a full light below and then an articulated light above, so that there's some relationship between the front elevation and the side elevation. But I couldn't tell, it was really hard to tell how many windows you're replacing and how many are new versus how many are existing. So that's why I'm couching this a little bit, because when I looked at the plans, I wasn't exactly sure, how much of this was actually new. If there was more new, then that would give you an opportunity to change those windows slightly.
Yeah, Dan, we put letters in the upper left corner of all the windows. It's hard to see, but we've got either E or N for new. But that's, yeah, good advice.
Yeah, so it would really be a matter of taking some of the larger windows potentially and making a full light at the bottom versus divided top, divided bottom. But that's a pretty, I don't know, it's just a general comment. The other thought is that, now if I'm looking at the existing elevation, the top window on the left, there's some nice distance between that and the edge of the house, but on the one that's proposed, it's really close, and I'm not sure whether you slipped that window over or whether that was just drawn in the wrong way.
Right. No, I agree.
So it's getting really tight to the edge of the corner of the house, and I would pull it back.
Yep.
Pull it back. So the only other thought here, and this is just a general comment, but you see how you've created a porch line now? So you've got a base of the building that we've talked about, which is really nice, where you're going to soften that height. You've got a new line that's created by the porch. If you wanted to, you could take that line, that fascia, and take it all the way across the house. So
a belly band, yeah.
Did somebody actually put that on the cursor? Mark, do you have control of it?
No, Matthew does.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, can you there you go, that line, right. Now that would be pretty typical of a lot of the houses that we see in Ross, but what that would also do would be visually to bring that height down slightly.
Yep.
So that, and it would carry that line around. So that does a couple things for you that I think might help that elevation a little bit.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Then going to the back elevation. So there's only just really two concerns. One is what we just talked about, and I'm not sure I see the need for the stair. It's not required from a code standpoint. I do, given the fact that if, you really wanted a stair, I think tucking it around the corner so that you don't see it from the street works well. I have a little problem though with the difference. Now we're changing materials. So my question was really, geez, you've done a really nice job articulating the front of the house. Is there any particular reason that we didn't use the same rail details on the back of the house?
Oh.
And I'm sure there's probably some reason behind it. It seems to me that you could relate those two railing details a little bit more closely than they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would eliminate the stair. I mean, personally, I think the stair detracts from the rear elevation of the house, but I could see why, it's nice to have a means of egress, but it's certainly not required from a code standpoint. My inclination would be to take it out.
Yep. Okay.
So I think that's it, Mark. Those, I think, are all my notes.
Thank you, Dan. Joey, would you like to go next?
Sure. Dan said a lot of the things that I also thought. First of all, the base, I think it was a good move to make that brick or stone or something. Anything different than plaster. I would vote heavily against plaster, but to really differentiate it and to break up the verticality of the house and to give it kind of a heavy base to sit on. I think that goes a long way to kind of giving some detail to a very vertical house. So I think that's a great move. First of all, I forgot to say at the beginning of my comments, I think the floor plan's great. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you guys decided to do that, because I think Adam and Libby, this is going to be a much more livable house. I think for so many reasons, it's a great move. So well done on that, and well done on the front porch. I think it really gives it much more of a neighborhood feeling when you walk by. It's just a much more welcoming house. So I'm mostly really enthusiastic about it, but here's a couple of my comments. I also think the spiral staircase is out of the style's wrong for the house, and it's not that attractive, and it happens to be in a place that would most affect the most affected one-story neighbor on that property line, with people going up and down it, and you don't really need it, and it's not very attractive. That's just my personal opinion. If you were going to have a second means of egress, I'd say move it to the interior corner of that deck and reorganize the deck fenestration and the deck location. But I wouldn't put it towering over that one-story neighbor, and I think you don't even really need it. So that's my comment there. I have a question for you. Would it be possible to bring the plate height on the second floor down to 7 feet, and then use the perimeter areas of those bedrooms creatively as closets or desks, kind of in an old-fashioned house where you have a ceiling like this where you have dormers, and you don't necessarily have an 8-foot plate height. Did you ever think of that, so you could come down 1 foot, because it's a very big non-conforming house that is now being jacked up 5 feet?
Yeah, we didn't think about that because, well, for the simple reason, I guess, that this project, as you might recall from the last meeting, this project started out as a kitchen remodel. And the scope has grown essentially because they figured out that there was a mold infestation, and that kind of opened up a can of worms. And then the thought was to best deal with that by elevating the house. So as it is now, we're removing the entire first floor. When they jack up the house, it's going to be from beneath the second floor joist. I think if we were to start to mess around with the roof, that it's approaching a demolition, and it would be very costly. And I think then Adam and Libby would like to avoid that. I think that if we were starting from scratch, that a lot of those ideas about the roof would be great to entertain, but I'm not sure that the cost benefit is there to start altering the roof itself and the second floor wall heights. That's my sense.
Okay. So is the landscape going to be on a separate permit? Is that how this is? Because we don't see a lot of like where the equipment is. We don't see what the driveway is going to look like, what the gates are going to look like. Typically, we have a lot more information about the landscape before we sign off on it, just because it's a very visible house in the neighborhood. So are you proposing to have the architecture first and then the landscape second?
Well, we want to engage. There is a landscape architect on board who's been dealing with some improvements in the rear yard, but she hasn't yet gone into the front yard and the front gate and all of that. My sense is that we were hopefully going to get support from you all this evening, and then right away dive into what we need to do for the town council meeting in August, which would include landscape architecture, and including the front and what that might look like. So.
Okay.
Yeah, Joey, I had the same concerns, because I didn't know whether you guys are going to put a fence, a low fence up front. I didn't know whether you're going to have a gate. What are your paving materials? What are the materials in back? Same kind of question. So I think there probably should be a resubmittal of the landscape plan at some point.
Yeah.
Mark, can't hear you. You're muted.
Maybe do them on a separate permit and get this going with the town. But like, I feel like we should see something we do care a lot about what the landscape looks like, where the pool equipment is, what the gates are going to look like. It's the first thing people see.
I agree
Um,
completely. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And it-
Andy, the way it works is on projects, we always see both of those aspects together. So
I
that's why you were getting questions asked about it, whether it's the gate or the pool equipment, et cetera. So that's something that we actually always see before we recommend a project.
Got it.
I would say that this is not going to be incredibly complicated, I'm hoping, right? From a landscape perspective, from the front is fairly contained, right? And
Exactly. I don't think it needs to hold things up.
I was just going to say, Joey,
Okay.
there are probably ways that we can help you, we can review it and help you.
Get going on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate that. If it's possible that we can get going on the building and have the landscape architecture reviewed separately, or both together, but if we can proceed to the town council meeting for the building part, that would be
Yeah,
wonderful if possible.
you can try. I'm just not sure. In my recollection, they've never approved a project without the landscaping aspect of it, just to be determined later. Usually they have always done it as one project.
This is the town council.
Correct.
Oh, yeah. No, my thought was that we get that work done in the next month so that it is ready to go for the town council.
Sure.
And somewhere in there, run it by you all, maybe via email through Matthew. I'm not sure how best to do that.
So Chair Krushnet, if I may provide a comment.
Please.
The lack of landscape plan has been identified as an incomplete item, which would not allow this application to proceed to town council. It is perfectly within ER Group's purview to determine that there is or is not enough information for design review.
Okay, but as long as we're here, I think we should continue with the actual architecture and our comments here, because it's quite likely that this will move on and the only outstanding item would be the landscaping.
And
What
if I may
What if we
clarify-
said, what if we said, we'll do whatever you want with the landscaping? To get the project to move forward.
Yeah,
I think
I just think that some of the people would like to just see the gates, et cetera, but I think that could probably be done in almost an email fashion, as this is a relatively simple landscaping when it comes to the gates, et cetera, but maybe not. That's up to Matthew and the town.
So Chair Krushnet, if I might recommend, we get the summary of comments from the ADR group and a recommendation with the acknowledgement that the group has not reviewed the landscape plan. And so the full design review you can't recommend on the full design review because you'll need to see that. And then once we as staff get a hold of that, we'll review the landscape plan and make a determination as to whether or not it needs to go back in front of the ADR group as a full meeting, or if we can consult and we have enough information to move forward to council.
yeah,
So that'll be my
yeah.
recommendation for this item.
Yeah, Patrick, that makes sense. I mean, let's try to keep it as simple as we can. I think our concern is really, we always do have landscape plan. It's really more about what kind of paving material, impervious surfaces do we have? What's the landscape plan ultimately, look like in conjunction with, if there's any fences in particular, along the main street or side lot lines and or a gate. All those things should be included. It doesn't necessarily have to go through a completely formal review if you think we can do it, separately.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple project, but I think
Yeah.
I would hate to hold this up on that. That said, that we've actually never put one forward to town council without a landscape plan.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I can tell you the one up the street, boy, I've gotten a lot of complaints about how that all went down. It doesn't look the way it was proposed. It's a very pedestrian street. People walk by that landscape and the residents really care about it.
So if I could just jump in here 1 second. Our backyard plan is done. it's all, that is drawn up. I've been working with Jenny Tippett. And so side fences, back fence, where the the pool equipment enclosure has been built. So all the planting is going in tomorrow. So that is all drawn up. She, I'm sure, could draw up something for the front. It's gonna entail, you know, because we have a plan to make the driveway now is just completely straight when you pull in. We're gonna get rid of the bomb shelter, pull that off to right. She will know all the plants and the gate and surfaces and all of that. And I'm sure she can have that drawn up, you know, in a week, if that would help.
That would
Maybe it's
help.
something
Yeah.
we could just look at, you know, together online and say, and give our comments and then get you ready to go to town council on the next
Okay,
round.
that would be
great.
Yeah.
That would be
I
awesome.
think it'd be good. I think it'd be good for us to actually make some recommendations of what we would like to
Yeah.
do right here. That way we don't end up with two back and forths.
great.
So, I think we addressed the paving. I think we addressed the fence. I think we addressed some front landscape, whether it be a hedge, if there's that, you know, what our opinion on what that could be, so that we could help guide them a little bit. That might be helpful for them so that we don't go back and forth 2 or 3 times.
Exactly. And that was when I was doing my comments. That was my next set of comments, was not sure what's going on with the landscape, but here are my recommendations there, is to keep the pool equipment out of the setbacks and to keep it away from your neighbors as much as possible, to soundproof it, to move the driveway so you don't enter straight onto the front porch, so that there's a little more of a, because your parking is really where you enter. You know, you don't want to just like drive straight into your front porch. You want to offset it, which I think you're probably planning on doing anyway. Let's go back to that.
Mhm.
Back to the front porch screen.
But look at the plan there. You see where you
It's
see
off to the west.
Right. So to the right is where you'd have the vehicular parking,
Right.
and to the left is where you'd have the pedestrian gate.
Right.
And plenty of greenery in front of the fence, so that you
Mhm.
don't see a huge wood fence like what's happening up the street. Like, lot of greenery.
What house are you talking about, Joey?
The Shoeys, they kind of
Oh, right.
at the last minute, they had to change their landscaping plan. And this is actually something you guys should be aware of, is that you submit a landscaping plan and it gets approved, and you're held to it to get your certificate of occupancy. And if you end up, you know, finances are a little different, or you want to make a change, then you have to come back to us, which is like anathema. Nobody wants to do that. So it's really good to get it right on the first time. Get, you know, make sure it's in the budget.
Yeah.
Make sure
That's fine.
you're all on the same page.
Yeah.
That's what we have now, though. We have a bunch of plants in front of the fence, and
Right.
that's kind of what we do in Vision.
Exactly. And, you know, depending on what the fire department will allow, which is less and less these days, but a lot of that base of the house could be screened with pretty planting.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
shrubbery,
Yeah.
permeable pavers, etc.
Mhm.
I have a really small design thing I wanted to ask. Are those flared columns?
Yes.
They're
Yeah,
a little
little bit.
flared. I was wondering what everybody thought about that with the style of this house, if that were appropriate or a little kind of grand for this, and should they be more square?
Well, Joey, I actually thought they were square and flared. I thought they were more of an arts and crafts style where they were slightly tapered at the
Correct.
top, but they were square. Are they round or are they square?
No, you're right, Dan. They're squared and slightly tapered. And there was a house
Okay.
we saw that we liked.
Which would be pretty typical of that style, I think it's hard to tell because they do look, I couldn't tell either. They look round.
They
But
look, and I was worried that it was the wrong style of column
Yeah.
for this type
Yeah.
of house. And then I could not tell what type of plinth they were sitting on, or what the detail was at the base where it sits on the deck. And I think that's really important. Like that little gesture there, that front porch, is going to determine the whole style of this house, I think, for people walking by and seeing it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
to get those little details right is just going to make that house sing. I did not notice what type of rain gutters you were proposing.
Well, to be honest, I haven't gotten into that level of detail yet, but some
Okay.
suggestions.
Joey wants to hear you say copper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
And Dan,
Copper-
I'll be the first one to say copper, but Joey brings up a good point that normally we look at, are we looking at true light windows?
For
Are we
sure.
looking, what are we looking at in terms of, the coloration of the house, the shingles, the gutters, the downspouts and such? Because none of that's really been submitted here.
We
don't have a materials board, so we don't know the colors or anything.
Yeah.
we don't, and that's on our list to put together in the next 2 weeks. So
Can you pull that together with the landscape plan so we can look at that both?
yes, yeah, absolutely.
I would highly suggest at least copper in the front. If you could afford, make that in the budget, and then you could go to something less expensive on the sides and in the back.
I agree. I think copper would be great.
So that's it for me. It's really great. I think it's really going to be a wonderful addition to the streetscape there. I wish it were a foot lower. That's probably my biggest beef.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Mark, would you like to make comments?
yeah, I think most of the things that I was thinking about noting have already been said. If we could show the plan, there's an email on the screen right now, or the elevation, the elevation right here. I think that Dan's comment about thickening up the sort of the board around the plinth is important. I think I would also be generous with the fascia at the porch. I think it's important to understand the proportion of that detail and not default to something that is stock, let's say, just out of default. So I think that could be thickened up a little bit to help sort of layer this thing in a horizontal and a vertical fashion. I think that would be in conjunction with those columns. I like the square taper approach. I think that works really well. And I would do a simple, I would make sure the base and the cap of those are reasonably simple. They don't have to be overly. I think that for the most part, I agree with the stair in the back. I think while I appreciate the compactness of a spiral stair, I think it seems like an alien on the back elevation. So if you can get rid of that, that would be, I think, beneficial. I think you're gonna have some plantings around the base of the home. So
Yeah.
Rick, I would prefer stone, but that's a total personal choice. So whatever you guys default to. And then I would say that my biggest concern is that streetscape in regards to whatever you do from a fencing standpoint and a planting standpoint. And what I found offensive about the home on the opposite side of the Connors, I was not part of that review. I think I was on vacation that time. But the fence is incompatible with the streetscape that we have existing on Bolinas. So what you see walking down that street is a lot of transparency in regards to front elevations. Your neighbor, the home that was opposite the Connors that is now walled off used to be a lot more transparency. As you move down the street, there's a lot of connection between the homes and the street. So I would encourage you to look at a plan, look at a streetscape that had visual connection to the home. You are really improving the visual statement of the home. So let it be seen from the street. Don't put up a 6-foot fence. Don't try to go 30-foot hedges, whatever it might be. I think that's really important to the character of that street. So, right now you have a very low fence. I think it's a picket fence, if I'm not correct. So I'm not saying you need to duplicate that, but I think it's really important not to replicate what's happening in the opposite side of the Connors, because that is not in keeping with the streetscape on Bolinas, especially across the street. It's very consistent around Bolinas that you have transparency into the property.
Okay.
And I would also encourage on the rear elevation. I think I mentioned this, and maybe Joey mentioned this. to think about how you can tie that deck into the front porch detailing. I think that would just tie the whole home together. It'd be really nice. So, but I also just want to say, really nice job in responding to the comments and working with the neighbors. You know, as I think one of the south neighbor commented, like, that's not always the case. So thank you very much. And it shows. It's a great design. So,
Thank you.
there you go.
Thank you.
Really nice job.
Yeah.
I would echo most of the comments made. I think from the street, from the north elevation, the project looks great. I would follow Dan and others' suggestions on the thickening of the board above the bricks to tie things together. On the south elevation, as I mentioned, and other people did as well, I would lose the staircase and make the railings similar to the front of the house, which looks beautiful. I have one question on the south elevation.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at the stairs that go across, just above the word elevation, there's a white something. It almost looks like a sideways trash bin or something next to a railing. What is that?
Barbecue.
It's the grill.
Barbecue.
Oh, that's
the
the grill.
barbecue.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know what that was. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I have no comments to add architecturally other than what other people have already said. For the landscaping, as two others mentioned, the town rarely ever lets anybody put pool equipment in the setback because it just makes more noise. The reason people often want to put it in the setback is because it's noisy and that gets it far away from the house, which is exactly why the town doesn't let people put it in the setback, because then it's noisy for neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And as Matthew mentioned, without the town council never passes any house project, period, without the landscaping plans having been approved already. And it seems there's some detailing on this, whether it's the columns or the landscaping, that needs to be submitted. So, you know, hopefully you can try to do that via email, but I'm not sure it will work. It depends on, you know, what people like Joey and others might be able to do as far as looking at things and offering suggestions between now and town council. And obviously town council can do as they choose, but in the last 8 years, they've never approved a project where we haven't seen the landscaping plans first and commented on them. So I would be surprised if they did in this instance, but they always could. You could always try. So those are my comments. So I think we're ready just now to make our overall recommendations. Matthew, as far as your shall column, 1, you've got the landscape issues. 2, it would be the thickening up of that board above the bricks, removing the staircase, having the 2 railings front and back match each other.
The
And then I
band,
think, sorry, go on.
sorry, the band between the floor levels that Dan suggested that echoed the deck, you know, having that wrap around to break up the, what elevation is that toward the
Yeah,
car?
go back to the side elevation. You can see where the porch actually hits the side elevation, carry that board across and around the house.
Yeah.
And that would break up the vertical aspect of the massing.
And that's inexpensive, and that's a really great gesture to kind of break up the verticality as it
Yeah.
faces the neighbors.
Especially if you do like a little molding detail, like a water table or something at the top and bottom, and it'll help actually give it a little bit more mass. But the one question before you go too far there, Mark, the other Mark brought up a stone base. It's not under the shall category, but I felt, I didn't bring it up in my comments originally, but I felt the same way. I think the brick is, I think the brick works okay, but I think if you could make it stone, if there was a consideration to make it stone, I think it would actually, the variation of the materials, because everything right now is pretty vertical and horizontal, that texture at the bottom, the foundation of the house could really be elegant. So I would, you know, that would be something that I would take a hard look at.
Okay.
I would put
Sure,
that
could
in
you
a
respond
shell
to,
category only because I don't think it would be any more expensive than a brick veneer. I think
I
you
know.
could go ledge stone veneer,
Yeah.
gray, that would be so attractive,
It would be beautiful.
and it would be the exact same price as a brick veneer. So
Yeah.
it's just a style thing that I think goes better with a house.
Yeah, I do too.
And I'm glad to hear you say ledgestone, because I think ledgestone would be
Yeah, would be nice.
I think that's the call on this house.
Okay.
I'd just like to point out for the record that Mr. Sutros also joined the meeting.
Hi, Stephen.
Okay.
Okay, so Matthew and Patrick, are we good then?
Yep, I think we just need a vote from the ADR group. And without the,
I'd like to give my support to the front encroachment in the front setback. I think that was mentioned by Andy based upon those stairs. I just want to give my support to that as far as an architectural element that we think adds to the value of the home, the value of the architecture, yet it does encroach upon that front setback. I think, Andy, that's what you mentioned. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
like to support
Yeah.
that as far as a move. Like the front facade is so vastly superior by allowing that to go forth. So I just want
Definitely.
So one other question for you guys, and is the raising the height 5 feet versus 4 feet, is that in the recommended or shall category?
Well, it just
That's it.
sounds like such an economic hardship
I know.
that I just have a hard time saying shall. I just wish it could happen, but
With the other moves, it should soften it though, and I think it'll mitigate that to some extent.
I concur with that. I can't see that. It would be nice, but it's not a show.
Okay.
I also like high ceiling plates for everybody. So,
And 9 feet is so much better than 8 feet for living level, really.
oh no, I wouldn't take it away from I would never make you have an 8 feet in your living space down below. I was trying to just make, quaint bedrooms upstairs that had, cool ceiling lines and dormers and things like that. You can have a 7-foot plate on an upper story with bedrooms.
Right.
I think, on the interiors, Andy, I think what's going to happen is when you lighten up, you're going to have to gut the interiors to lighten up this house to raise it up, to be able to do the foundation work. Once you look at that framing, you're going to be able to play with those ceiling heights on the second floor, which could really be quite nice.
Yeah.
To reframe some of that.
Right.
okay, and Patrick, you were saying you would like a vote?
yeah, so we just need a recommendation from the ADR group. And in this case, I'd recommend Mr. Sutro just abstain from this vote since he wasn't part of the conversation. But if I'll just do a roll call, and my understanding is that we have the shalls and considers, and then it's kind of a conditional, if the ADR group chooses to approve the design, it's conditional on the ADR group getting a chance to actually see the landscape design before we make a full recommendation by the council. So if that's fine, I'll just do a quick roll call.
Okay.
You can vote aye or no. So Winey,
Yeah,
Buckingham,
Aye.
Fritz,
Aye.
Krishna.
Aye.
Okay, so that's a recommendation of approval for the design with the condition that the landscape gets reviewed by the ADR group before full recommendation goes forward to council.
Great.
okay.
And then also, I've had a request from the Marin Art and Garden Center. We're doing kind of a courtesy concept review of a temporary sign that's being proposed. Their designer has to leave in about 15 minutes. So we were wondering if we could quickly take a look at that item. It would require reorganizing the agenda to have that item come next. And then we'd close out with what would normally be.
I think that's fine. I have one comment there and one comment only.
I would have suggested that switch anyway, just based on the time of the two remaining items.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Adam.
Thanks.
Bye, Libby.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye,
I didn't,
Andy.
where's
Thank
Adam? I
you.
don't see Adam. I see Libby, but no Adam.
No, he was, I don't know.
No,
I'm
he's
here.
been hiding. He's been hiding.
There
You
he
have to scroll
is.
down.
I just want to say, FYI, I love your guys' suggestions. I love the stone thing down on the bottom, and I love the thing you mentioned, Dan, going around the side of the house. So
And
thank you guys
We'll
for your
happily
input.
get rid of the staircase also.
Your house is gonna be great.
Libby, I know why you were taking the lead on this and Adam was dark. Nice going.
I think it's going to be great.
By the way, Dan, while I got you, Molly was doing a little audit with your company. She said, if I call Dan, will he remember me? I go, absolutely. Anyway,
Take
thank you.
care.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Thanks,
See ya.
bye.
And our apologies to the Sugars for the slight delay as we discussed the Marin Art and Garden Center signage.
Okay, thank you, Chair and ADR group members, Planner Matthew Weintraub. The project is the Marin Art and Garden Center at 30 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Jessica Fairchild is the architect and applicant. The project proposes to install a new temporary sign facing on the existing main sign located on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Under the municipal code, the project is not considered a new sign because of the existing sign and because of the temporary nature of the proposed facing. Therefore, the project is not subject to a discretionary review. It may be noted that any new permanent signage at the Marin Art and Garden Center would be subject to approval of a master sign program application for the entire property. The applicant requests conceptual advisory design review for the proposed project. Per Town Council Resolution number 1990, prospective applicants may seek conceptual advisory design review to elicit preliminary design-related feedback early in the process and prior to formal submittal of any discretionary land use permits. As mentioned previously, no permits are required to install the temporary sign facing, and the applicant seeks a courtesy review. Staff has received no public comments on the project. The applicant is seeking the ADR Group's recommendation regarding the consistency of the proposed project design with the intent and criteria of design review. The ADR Group's recommendation to the applicant is non-binding. And this concludes my introduction to the project, and I'm available to answer questions of the ADR Group members.
Okay. Does anyone need to say anything about it, or should people just look and comment?
Let's just put the sign up.
Can I have a understanding, a clarification, Matthew, on the timing? Is there an end date or a code that says temporary? I'm just curious what the word temporary means in regards to
the applicant's project description has indicated that the sign would remain in place for approximately 2 years, at which time they would revisit the sign.
temporary. Okay. Thank you.
Temporarily permanent.
Like the planning and building building.
Yeah, the buildings at our center, just temporary. We won't have that trailer there for long.
Would someone like to comment on it first?
I'll go.
Go ahead, Joey.
So I really applaud it looks more fresh and modern and young. My only comment is that I would make the ground dark, like green or dark green or blue, and make the lettering white. I think that just that big white sign is very jarring for this town, and I'd rather see it kind of where the letters pop, but not the white sign pops. And you could still have the yellow flower, the modern flower as a logo, but it could be against a dark ground and your lettering could be light. That was my first and only recommendation.
All right. Someone else?
Yeah, I mean, I had two comments. One was the same thing when I look at it in context with what we see across the street for Ross Town Hall, the fire department, city, police, etc. It doesn't need to be the same, but it's seen in the same context. And you can see even in this photo, and I know they want it to pop. I mean, that's the idea, is to actually make it more visible. So I think this is really a subjective thing. I would have made it a darker background as well, but it just seems to me that from a graphic design standpoint, I would have probably picked up the same lettering, but put it in a contemporary context. In other words, have some reference to the old Marin Art and Garden Center. But that is purely a subjective comment, right? So, but I think the more important one is really the sign being too light.
Dan, can you just clarify, you're talking the font, is that correct?
Yeah, it just seems to me that when you're going through a transition and you're rebranding something, the reference to the old is as important as a reference to the new. And so something that links the two. This is completely different than what was there before. And what was there before was really a very traditional arts and crafts, 1920s, 1930s sign that is really what we've been using as in the city as well. But, coming up with something new, I think is great. And rebranding Marin Art and Garden Center, I think is fabulous. I just think there could have been a little bit more of a connection to the past. That's all. And it's really the font.
I can change. I would echo Ben's comments. I think the font that we have currently is, there is a classic nature to it. So there's some art sort of center about that font. But I would say, while I understand the desire to have it, contrast a little bit, I might just take the background down a few tones at minimum. I'm not sure I would recommend going back to something dark, because then there's a little bit of, then why do it maybe mode, right? I think taking it down 2 or 3 tones is gonna, like, even in the rendering, on below in the photograph, it's a little bit too strong. So I would recommend maybe the background just be toned down a bit. I understand why flipping it back to something dark is going to be, then why did we make that adjustment? So that would be my recommendation. Change the font back to the sort of the capital. It's sort of, the capital letters in the secondary tone. And then I would darken it too.
Stephen?
I kind of agree with the bright white, and it seems also that it won't weather well even over the course of 2 years. But also, I'm nervous. I guess it doesn't really matter to me much, but it seems like if it's printed on flexible material and attached with grommets, with nails or screws, it just seems like a poor construction technology. It seems like it should be printed on a piece of metal that's rigid. But I don't know exactly. It just sounds to me like pulling something tight over wood with nails or screws and grommets is a recipe for something that's going to degrade.
Stephen, that sounds too permanent.
Well, 2 years is a long time for something with
it is
vinyl and grommets. That sounds kind of.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So in my comment, I would echo what Joey started out saying, the word jarring. And it is jarring, and I think it's completely out of character for that intersection. Yes, it draws attention to it, but so would a neon green, building sitting there. I think the sign that exists is nice. We're talking about a garden. I guess we're rebranding a garden. If people want to celebrate nature, usually they want to look at something that's more natural looking rather than white, and a banner that's put over it. And as Stephen pointed out, it seems like it's going to wear and degrade. And 9 months into this 2 years, what's it going to look like? I'd rather just see something that was put up that was actually permanent and nice looking, with the darker background, and probably, I'm not that concerned about the font, but definitely a darker background, because that big white sign is sort of an eyesore.
I will just mention to all of you on the ADR, our family has a lot of involvement here with the Marin Art and Garden Center, and they are really fighting for their existence. So they're really trying to come up with new ideas to get more young people there, to get more funding, to get more interest and excitement around it. So I am very supportive of them trying to rebrand themselves and get new blood and new excitement. So that was why I was kind of like, well, maybe kind of a younger font, something more modern, it might attract a younger group in the funding that they need very desperately to survive. Otherwise, that chunk of land is going to become something different in our future. So I am just personally, with my family's experience, very invested in that. And I was just trying to figure out a way to make it kind of fresh and young and modern, kind of fit in with Ross, but also make people who drove by think, whoa, something new is happening there. Like something really cool's going on there, because there are a lot of new programs and they're trying to generate interest. So that's the reason I didn't necessarily hone in on the font and wanting it to look really traditional. I just thought I should mention that to you, as I know they're really fighting for their survival.
That's a fair point. Thank you for bringing that up, Joey. That's a fair point.
And it's something very special we all have in this town, and we'd be very sorry to see it go.
Mhm.
So to work with them to make this really exciting and new, but also feel like part of Ross, I think we really need to help them out with this.
All right, well, I think, Matthew, you have our comments on it. It sounds like they're going to do what they want to do because they've made it a temporary of 2 years to get around any actual oversight on the sign. So it sounds like there's nothing we can do other than make our comments, which you now have.
Thank
And
you.
Chair Krishnan, if we could also just open it up in case there's anyone in the of the public that wanted to comment.
Does anyone in the public want to comment on the sign?
I see no hands.
Okay.
One more thing, Mark. I just want to thank Patrick and Matthew for bringing this forward. Sometimes in the past 10 years, we've had things happen in the town that are very public and we haven't had the chance to comment on them. So appreciate the ability to see this, because it is really a feature of the town.
Mhm.
I think Dan would support that, as some of the comments I've heard him say in the past. So thank you for bringing it in front of us.
Yes, thanks. And good luck with that. No, it's a cool logo.
Looks
Excuse
like
me,
Antonio wants to
I'm
go.
new to this. Is there an opportunity for us to respond? Is that something you'd like to hear, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I don't know all of you. I'm Antonia Adancio. I'm the executive director of Marin Art and Garden Center. I've been here for 5 years. I want to say that we are challenged by the COVID crisis, but on the whole, our organization is thriving and moving forward in a very positive direction. And this rebranding is really a celebration of this wonderful place that we have and treasure, and that means so much to the town. So I really, Joey, appreciate so much your words of support. And I know that the town is really behind us in wanting this resource to stay strong. The rebranding is an effort to really communicate better about just what a wonderful place it is. And as Joey said, to attract people who may not even bother coming in, because frankly, the sign is not very inviting. It doesn't really say much about what happens when you come in there. And a lot of people have told us that it looks like it's a private place and they're not really very welcome. So a lot of what we're trying to do is to change that impression and to have the community really better served by Marin Art and Garden Center. So we've embarked on this rebranding, and Laura Scott is here tonight from Studio Scott. She brings to us a wealth of experience working with cultural organizations all over the US. She was responsible for the rebranding of the California Academy of Sciences when they opened their new museum. So she really has thought long and hard about these questions and issues. So we invited her to be with us tonight. I would love it if you would have the time to let her tell you a little bit about the brand and what it means and why the sign is important.
Well, you know, we sort of did this, we changed it around. We've got the sugars waiting because it was only going to take 5 or 10 minutes. I don't know if we have time to listen to the rebranding, because I think we were just really commenting on the aesthetics of the sign as opposed to the rebranding. And if you want to do that another time or after the sugars, that's fine. But I don't really think it's fair to keep them all waiting as we listen to the rebranding for the Art and Garden Center.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, so why don't we then move on to the Sugar residents?
And Chair Christian, it does look like we have a hand up. So it might be for this item. I can unmute that member. Diane, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now? I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand. It took me a while, but thank you. I know that you have other business, and I just would like to make a comment. I'm Diane Dudon. I'm president of the board of the Marin Art and Garden Center, and I would just like to echo Antonia's words and the presentation, and that having lived here for a very, very long time, I truly understand the signage and the challenges and wanting to maintain the look of the town, and appreciate that you all recognize the value of the Marin Art and Garden Center and its being here, and that it is important for us to be able to draw in people to the Art and Garden Center to continue going forward. And I realize that that is not your main concern. Your main concern is design and design for the town, but I really appreciate Joey's comments, because she has intimate knowledge of the fact that the Marin Art and Garden Center is working very, very hard to expand its participant base. And given COVID-19 and what's going on right now, I think that we have a plan to roll all of this out starting August 3rd, and would very much appreciate your support and would do everything that we can to make it work with you. But we would really appreciate it if you could support this going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you. Okay, and Patrick, you don't need any vote or anything from us. You just wanted our comments, correct?
This is adequate.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you
Moving
all.
on to the Sugar residents, 34 Poplar Avenue. Does the town want to make comments on it before the owners and their team give their presentation?
Yes, I have a brief presentation.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair and ADR group members, Planner Matthew Weintraub. The project is the Sugar residence, 44 Poplar Avenue. Brad Eichste is the landscape architect and applicant. The project proposes a landscape rehabilitation, including constructing a new pool and spa, arbor structure, outdoor kitchen, and patios in the rear and side yards, constructing new entry steps, patios, and a water feature in the front yard, replacing existing fencing, and installing new landscape plantings and artificial turf. The applicant has submitted several versions of the project plans, including the version in the staff report and the version transmitted earlier today. The applicant can clarify the current project request. A variance is required to construct new structures within the minimum required yard setbacks, including a new pool and spa, arbor, outdoor kitchen, patios, and fountain. The nonconformity permit is required to replace, reconstruct, and expand existing nonconforming patios. Design review is required to construct new fences greater than 48 inches in height adjacent to the street, new retaining walls greater than 48 inches in height, which can refer to the pool, and for a project resulting in over 1,000 square feet of new or replaced impervious surface landscape. The applicant has submitted a neighborhood outreach description, which is included as attachment 4. Staff has received public comments from 8 commenters, which were transmitted as attachment 6 or as late mail. These written comments include 1 commenter in support of the project and 7 commenters objecting to the project. The objectors generally cite potential privacy impacts of the proposed new pool. Other objections include lack of available guest parking, potential fire danger from the fire pit, location in a flood zone, and potential survey errors. The Sugars have also submitted a written comment in support of their project. Staff is seeking the ADR group's recommendation regarding the consistency of the proposed project design with the intent and criteria of design review. As noted with the previous project, to assist in the ADR group's discussion and deliberation, staff has included specific design review criteria and standards that are relevant to the project in the staff report. Staff will forward the ADR group's recommendation to the town council for consideration at the time that the application is heard by the town council. This concludes my introduction to the project, and I'm available to answer questions of the ADR group members either before or after the applicant's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. So now the Sugars and their design team can make their presentation.
Hi, my name is Jeff Sugar, and this is my wife, Cassie. We moved here in August 2019, purchased the house from the Gelatis, and are excited to be new residents of Ross. It's a beautiful new house that was remodeled in 2017, and we're looking to make improvements to the landscaping and backyard. And the goal here is really to seek your feedback be sensitive to the neighbors and their concerns, and figure out a path forward, so that we can make our improvements. We understand the setbacks, and with the property size, they are a challenge. We're willing to upsize plants. We share privacy goals, raise fences, added water features, and do what we can to help facilitate privacy and noise. And if my wife wants to make comments, I want to give her the opportunity to.
Thanks. Yeah, I won't regurgitate what we wrote in the letter, but generally speaking, we moved here, and more specifically to this property, because of the proximity to the school. We have a toddler that some of you may have seen running around earlier, and we just found out we have one on the way. So our intent is to be here for the long haul. Like I said, we love the neighborhood, and of course we want to be sensitive to the neighbors and how they're feeling about things. So like Jeff said, we're willing to make some concessions. I think the thing we didn't anticipate moving here was kind of being stuck at home in this COVID world now. And so it's important to us to create a more serene setting, outdoor setting, for both mine and Jeff's sanity, and also for our family as well moving forward. So thank you for your support in advance.
Is Brad or someone else going to do a presentation? I see Brad's on, but muted.
It's kind of an airplane noise. Is that?
I think it's Dan.
It's the air conditioning. I'm going to mute myself.
I think he's in a jet.
I don't know.
Can you guys see me right now or not?
Yes, I can see you, Brad.
You
I
can?
don't see
Okay.
you, Brad.
You need to scroll up or
See me now?
down. Yep.
Oh, hold on.
Am I on or not on?
Yeah, you're on, Brad.
You're on.
You can see the
Okay,
plan.
I'm at a cabin in Idaho at a lake. So I'm like out in the middle of nowhere. And that this works is pretty miraculous.
Sweet.
So anyway, sunset. Can you see that?
Beautiful.
Anyway, I just want to walk through a couple things about the project, and I think most of what we're talking about is the pool and the property line. But to start, we want to rework the front entry just to give a better sense of curb appeal. And the front entry means off of Poplar. Right now, it's very dated brick, decomposed granite. We're not changing the functional use of that area in any way. We're just trying to give that area a little bit better curb appeal, but we're also leaving the hedge that's there right now. So I don't know if anybody's been there, but you can't even really see the front yard from Poplar Avenue, which is basically downtown Ross. The rear yard, we are proposing an arbor with a barbecue, which is up against a 10-foot sound wall next to the office complex. And there's no changes to the house or the rear deck or the garage on these plans. So the house was redone, remodeled extensively, I don't know, a few years ago. And it was done by Polsky Architects. It's a beautiful home. The site plan survey that I got it from Polsky Architects, and it was based on a boundary survey and previously created drawings. And then I did field measurements and everything, all the property lines, all the aspects of the house measured out within inches of what the plan showed. So there's a little discrepancy about survey information, but it's a very simple lot. It's dead flat. It's a rectangle. There's not a whole lot of give and take to where the property location is and the property lines. But I've talked to Matthew, and we will stake property corners. We will do everything that we need to do to get the survey to be accurate and make sure that neighbors are very clear about where property lines are. I think, the biggest issue is the pool. And again, the pool in the setback, it seems like a recurring thing that we constantly get into in Ross. And, the setbacks on this property, 40-foot rear, 15-foot side, 15-foot side. 20, I can't read this, 20 or 25 foot front. Again, it's a property that nothing would be built here. As we've talked about, is like 75% of the homes in Ross would not have anything built, nothing, like just, they'd be parks basically if you conform to setbacks. So here we are again with trying to find a balance with a pool and a setback on a lot that is very narrow and long. And so our initial proposal is what you see as the plans dated 5/22/20. And we've been talking to neighbors. Initially, we had neighbor support, or at least we thought we had neighbor support. And then there was pushback and there was questions. And I just want to reiterate that we're open to working with all the neighbors and upsizing plant material. We'll keep, our goal was to put in a new Elaeocarpus hedge, which is a great hedge along the south property line. And we're open to upsizing those plant material. We're open to keeping the existing English laurel hedge it's not really a hedge anymore. It's really not been maintained. It's, it's not in good condition at all. But we share neighbor goals and we want to totally work with neighbors. I've worked really hard to balance impervious surface. We've talked about proposing replacing the driveway with pervious pavers, changing what the patios are now are like driveway pavers, something that you would rarely put in a residential landscape for a living area. We're changing that to a permeable stone patio. And I'm open to hearing all the comments about this and coming up to some solution that we can find a plan that works for everybody involved.
Okay. If there are no more comments from you, Brad, I can open it up to the ADR for questions before I open it up to the audience for questions or comments. Would someone in the ADR like to go first?
I had one question, Mark.
Yes, Dan.
Yeah, so from what I read, there's a proposal that the fence along the north and the south side of the property is 7 feet tall. Is that correct?
Just along the south property line. The other fence is 6 foot and more open in nature. We've left a gap in the fence so it doesn't feel so imposing, but it also meets pool safety code.
Okay.
So
Well, I wasn't. That makes sense. Now, what about where it was really unclear to me was if you look at the elevation facing Poplar, is there a fence actually on that elevation as well?
Right now, there's a hedge there that's very dense, and there's an old wire fence that's in the middle of it, and we were just going to leave it. We were just going to leave it. You can't hardly even see that there's a fence there, and the hedge that's so dense there right now is actually in pretty decent condition.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal was just to leave it and not change the aesthetics of the view from Poplar Avenue. We feel like it's okay, it's working. I think that maybe eventually that hedge might need to be replaced, but that was not.
Yeah, I mean that was sort of a general question, because if you look at the homes along Poplar, I know they vary, both the site in terms of the size of the site, size of the home, and actually as you get closer to downtown, they're also a little bit more enclosed. But most of the homes along Poplar have pretty good curb appeal, meaning that usually they have a low fence, they've got a little bit of landscaping, but you can see the house from the street. And actually, when you were talking about curb appeal, that's why I wasn't quite sure exactly what the intent was. Is the intent to screen it along Poplar, or is the intent eventually to open it up to Poplar?
Right now, we were just trying to leave it as it is. I think we would be open to opening it up, but really what's interesting about this property is that the really the front door is on Poplar, but where people access this house is on Redwood. And so it's a little bit of a quandary here that in order to put a pool on this project is ideally you don't put a pool in a front yard to start. And so by default, the rear yard is where most people access the house. So, you know, curb appeal is a tough one on this one because which curb are you trying to appeal to? And so that was part of the reason of pushing the pool to the south property line, is to give the house a sense of entry from Redwood. And, you know, Poplar Avenue, that whole entry and that whole front garden space, people rarely go there and people rarely use that. Even, you know, there's even a question about what the address of this house is. I've had addresses that on the deed, it says Ross Commons Avenue. On the town, it says Poplar Avenue. You know, I did a project down the street from it and the address was Redwood Avenue. So, you know, I don't know what to think sometimes with this area of Ross, that, you know, we're street to street for one thing. The lots are barely conforming in any way. They're all narrow and.
Yeah, but you sort of answered the question in a way, in the sense that this is one of the, you know, really unique parcels in Ross where you need to be sensitive to both, right? It doesn't really have a front door and a back door. It really has two front doors, right? And the way, and one is, you know, where folks usually enter it, you know, they come in the garage, they walk in the back. But then there's also
it's like, you know, it's not your typical, it's not a typical lot in any way. And then to boot, the neighbor's house is right against the property line. You know, the neighbor's house is 2 feet from the property line. And then one neighbor has a shed that is 12 inches from the property line. And then the other property line is a 2-story office complex that is terrible. I mean, it's hideous. It looks down on the space and it provides no privacy. So part of the idea of the arbor is to give the Sugars a little bit of space, that the office complex is not staring down at their only livable outside space. And so here we are in COVID, when everybody wants to get their kids outside, and it's become the most critical. I've never had anything like it, where more people were pressing me to get their kids outside and get out of the screen, and to get, you know, get out of the house, get away from your screens, get away from the TV, and give me some place for my kids to enjoy the outdoor. And so this is the solution, that we're trying to create these spaces for outdoor living. And I've never had, in 28 years of doing landscape architecture as my own business, I've never had anything like it. I've never had more requests for outdoor family living space. And so there's a lot that went into this design. And back to the Poplar Avenue, we're open to, if there's some suggestions about how to improve curb appeal. But right now, that was not a primary goal. Is the goal of this plan was to leave the hedge, leave the fence that's there. When you walk in the gate, you're entering a serene courtyard, and nobody's going to hang out in that space. It's just a there's not going to be any tables. There's not going to be any, nobody is going to go there. So anyway, that was a long-winded response to a simple question.
Mark or Stephen or Joey, any of you have questions?
I have one, Mark, which is, and maybe I'm naive to something that you all are aware of, but the alternative plan that was presented with a larger hedge structure along the south, is that the current proposal, or is this in front of us the current proposal?
The current proposal is the plan with the pool pushed against the south property line. And then we got some pushback from the neighbor, and that's, you know, we're totally fine. We want to work with the neighbors. This was the first iteration of this. So then we created a secondary plan that pushed the pool. This pool is about 6 feet from the property line. I did another plan that pushed the pool 11 feet, 6 inches from the property line. But that's not the preferred alternative.
So this is
We'd
your
much
preference.
we'd much rather have either against the property line or maybe something in the middle of those two. Because again, we're back to our front entry, you know, the front entry aspect where Redwood Avenue truly is the front entry, and walking right next to a pool to go to the front entry of a house is not ideal. I mean, the Sugars would accept this as a alternative, but it's a big give. It's a big give. You know, the properties are already so small that all of a sudden we're giving a lot up to landscape. And again, the neighbor's house is right on the property line. And so that we're required to conform or come, you know, push into the middle of the property when the neighbor's house is 2 feet from our property line. Seems like we're being penalized because this house is so close.
And Brad, where's the pool equipment? Is it indicated or did I not see it?
Yeah, the pool equipment's located in a crawl space under the house. There's a perfect like workshop space that's perfect for pool equipment. So it'll be totally enclosed by walls of the house.
Yeah, thanks, Brad, for, you know, and just, you know, back on Brad's original point about the pool. I mean, it is a huge give for us to kind of move it. We think that, you know, if, look, we already have a kid out there playing in the pool. You know, it's an above the ground pool. He splashes around there. You know, from a noise perspective, like, I really don't think that it makes like a material difference. You know, so, you know, it is a big give for us. I just kind of want to reiterate that. And it feels like a little bit punitive to just move it over a couple feet. It really defeats the purpose of you know, what we're trying to do and maintain all the usable space in the backyard.
Okay, if there are no more, are there any more questions from the ADR? If not, I'll open it up to the audience.
Yeah, Mark, I just maybe
Mark, go ahead.
It's, which plan are we supposed to review? Like which proposal do you want us to take a serious look at? And maybe there are just variations on a theme here, but if we're going to comment on one, we want to at least know for Matthew and Patrick, like it's this plan that we're making comments against, just so that we are consistent amongst the ADR members.
Yes, thank you. So the applicant submitted complete project plans that are included in your staff report. And then yesterday, this revised landscape plan was submitted and we were asked to transmit it to the ADR group and that was transmitted to the ADR group. And so I believe the applicant can best explain what is the exact project proposal at this time.
What the initial submittal is what we would like to focus on right now.
Okay.
I would say,
you know, it got lost in translation a little bit. I'm in Idaho. I'm taking a break here for a week, and it got lost in translation a little bit that we put another plan in place that was an option if there was some discussion about pushing the pool to the center. The alternative was the extreme of push the pool to the center. We would like to find some happy medium, ideally we would like to have this plan approved. The plan dated 5/20/20 or 5/22/20. I'm just looking at the screen. It's hard to see exactly what the date is, but it's the initial proposal with the pool 6 feet from the south property line. That's our preferred option.
and from a staff standpoint, we'd appreciate comments based on what the applicant would be presenting to council, which would be this preferred option. Realizing that there is an alternative. So if you have comments that relate to it, you're welcome to do so, but the project that we're commenting on here is one that's being presented by the applicant. And then also just based on the number of people we have in the audience, my recommendation, Chair, would be that we limit comments to 3 minutes, which I'm happy to keep track of. And for anyone that's in the audience that doesn't know how to raise your hand, there are 3 little dots on the participant board. You can click that and select raise hand, and you'll be called on to give your up to 3 minutes of comments. If you have questions, you're welcome to ask them, but we'd ask that you ask the question and then wait until all of the comments have been received and either the applicant or the ADR group can respond to those questions at that time.
And one quick comment for the audience, as I've often heard the town council give. If you've already heard, we've read through your correspondence, and thank you for contributing that, and thank you for taking the time tonight to make your comments that you're about to make. But if you heard somebody already make the comment, there's no need to repeat it, and there's no need to delve into what variances are and the 3 reasons for a variance, because we're all very aware of that. We're also very aware of what a pool is and the noise that pools make. So try to keep that part brief, because we don't want each person speaking for 2.5 minutes about how noisy a pool is, because I think we all sort of know how noisy a pool is. Thank you, and we look forward to your comments.
And one last item, if you are calling in, it's *9 to raise your hand. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and just go through the list. So the first I have is Z Morrissey. And so I am unmuting you now.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I have only one question. Is there a formal intent to reestablish the property address? Meaning, is there an intent to move it to not Poplar?
That's not part of this application.
So, okay. So our next comment is Barbara Gately, and I am unmuting you now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have submitted a letter, so I won't go over that. I want to clarify one thing. Both the submitted materials and what was said tonight suggests that originally, I suspect you were referring to me, that I was in support of this proposal. When I first met Jeff and Cassie and we were talking, they mentioned that they were thinking about putting in a pool, and I said something bland about people being able to enjoy their property, thinking this was not probably going to come up for some time. And then about a week later, I got plans. And I looked at the plans, spent about 24 hours with them, and sent an email, which I could read to you, but I don't think I need to. It was basically saying it was just too close to my property. I actually have a picture of from my living room window that I would practically jump into the pool. And I also had spoken, as I said in the letter, I'd spoken to some friends who are real estate people who said that having an active pool that close to my house and my living area, it's right next to my living room, right next to my bedroom and kitchen, that it would lower my property value. And it's something that's of real concern to me. So that's one thing. When I sent my email to Jeff and Cassie, Jeff offered to provide alternative proposals. I never got alternative proposals. I understand one has been submitted now. I don't know, as Dan said several times, the property is so narrow. I don't see how placing that pool, even in the center, would mitigate the noise issue. So the other question I have, or comment I would have, I'm not going to go through the 3 different requirements for a variance, other than to say that the code requires the applicant to provide evidence supporting the 3 findings. And when I looked at the materials that were submitted by Jeff and Cassie, for instance, special circumstances they say in review with Ross Planning, we ascertained that many neighbors have pools, arbors, and barbecues. Well, which neighbors and how close are they to the neighbor's house? I understand that my house is on the property line, and that is being, it was suggested that somehow my closeness to the property line is creating their problems. They bought the property knowing where my house was and knowing that it could provoke problems with trying to put a pool in.
Barbara, that's your 3 minutes. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Okay, the next I have is under the name Lisa Gorman.
Hi, I'm Michael Gorham. Yeah, I'm Michael Gorham. I'm on my wife Lisa's account. I live across the street at 18 Redwood, and we have a pool. One of the points I think that can be, taken for granted is like the amount of pool noise that you might get. We don't use our pool that often. We use it within reason, but I think there's this idea that's being communicated that if you have a pool, you're going to be using it all the time. I say, from October to May, we don't use our pool at all. So there's no one in the pool. Of course, the use of every pool is going to be different, unique. They may not follow the same way we use ours. But the same thing goes like during the summer. On particularly warm days, you're going to use the pool. But when it's windy and cool, as it's been quite frequently, you're not using the pool. So that's one thing to consider. Obviously the location of the pool, there's those setbacks. If you move it to the middle to comply with the setbacks, you're just inconveniencing the property owners. Then you're meeting the qualifications of the town. It's not going to do anything about the noise, of course. Those are my 2 cents that I wanted to add. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And the last hand raise that I see is Margaret Francis.
Sorry, my computer chose that moment to attempt a security update. So my name is Margaret Francis, and I live at 20 Redwood, which is kind of across the street in catty corner from the Shugars. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I think the Shugars are a wonderful addition to the neighborhood, and I want them and their children to have every enjoyment of this beautiful property they bought. But I don't think that I can support the pool so close to Barb's property line for the reasons that are enumerated so elegantly in her letter. And I wish that they could think about how to enjoy that lovely backyard they have with, like a smaller pool on the other side. Maybe it's a hot tub. Like I would love for them to get every enjoyment from that property. But I think the cost to the neighbors is too high in terms of reduced value of Barb's property, in terms of the noise that would invariably intrude on her living space. And I wish I felt comfortable with it, and I don't. And I say that with full knowledge that I have a tiny house on a tiny lot, and someday I'm going to be begging you all for some, variance around the 5-foot setbacks or whatever it is, and you'll remember this. But I have to tell you, I think it's too much of an imposition on Barb the way that it is. It's just too much infringement on her property enjoyment from someone who is generally in favor of property rights. Those are most of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay.
I'm not seeing any more raised hands.
Okay, in that case, I can bring it back to the ADR for any questions and or comments after the neighbors have spoken. Would someone like to go first? Dan, are you still there? Oh, there you are. Sorry.
Yep, I'm here. So you want to open up for comments, Mark? You cut out there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Well, we had all the comments and the questions, so now we can just bring it back to the ADR for our comments and recommendations.
Yeah, I guess, I'm really sympathetic to the site. because of how tightly constrained it is and up against the office building and such. You know, it is a situation in my mind where, you know, the property really doesn't have a front yard and a backyard. It's really got two front yards. And I think that it's got to be looked at in that way. I mean, if I live in that neighborhood, I walk down Redwood all the time. I walk along Poplar all the time. And, you know, Poplar, what we're trying to do on Poplar is to bring it back to the way it was, in the sense that there's more of a street presence along Poplar. And at some point in time, I think taking that hedge down and opening up the front of that home to the street would be an appropriate thing to do, whether it becomes part of this plan or not. If you actually look at the homes along Poplar, most of them do that. Most of them will have a low fence, they have low planting, and the planting is layered as you go back towards the home. And I recognize that there's not a lot of distance here, but I still think that you could achieve that. You could have better, much better sort of street presence along that particular elevation. On the Redwood side, if you put a pool in the back and you treat it the way that this plan is currently designed, it clearly is a backyard, when I think it's also in a way, it's another front yard. I personally think that it's much too small of a site for a pool. I don't think it's appropriate, you know, given the scale of the home, the garage and such, and also the proximity to the neighbors, I think is, you know, adds another layer of complexity. I personally am supportive of the arbor, the built-in kitchen area, the dining area. I think they work well up against, you have the building there, you've got to deal with that, you know, particular, you know, set of circumstances, and having a built-in arbor area, kitchen, dining table and such, I think actually works quite well. I actually think the fire pit is perfectly fine. I know there were a number of comments about, you know, a gas fire pit causing fires. They do not. You know, if it was an open fire and that it had embers or something, that would be problematic. So I don't have a particular problem with that element either. But I just don't think that, given what we've got here to work with in terms of the scale of the site, the scale of the buildings, the facing on two major streets, that a pool in particular is appropriate.
Thanks, Dan. Stephen, would you like to go?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Let's see. So on the front along Poplar, which I know is not the major issue, but I very much agree with Dan that it would be nice, because that hedge is aged and kind of past its prime, and also hides a pretty house. And having a set of pretty homes along Poplar is what kind of makes it a cute street and a cute kind of announcement to entering the town of Ross. And so I very much agree, and especially if it's not intended to be an inhabited space, then you can let the public eye in a little bit more, maybe without feeling vulnerable, because you're not engaging in social behavior there. And so I very much agree that it would be nice if that was let your eye in a little bit more. To that end, I think it's important to also consider the aesthetic along the other frontage, and they are both frontages, and what the layered planting looks like, and the screening, the fence. But I think it's designed in a pretty way, and I think that it fits that criteria for me on the Redwood facade or yard facade. And so I think treating them both as pretty front yards is the way to go. I agree with Dan in that way. I think that generally all of these properties, or many of the properties along Poplar and in similar circumstances along Bolinas and other places, so severely don't conform to setbacks that I think that the intent of the side setbacks particularly don't help us one way or the other, in that the social activity, it's intended kind of to keep the usable patios and terraces and places where we're going to hang out and socialize, keep them away from one another to create a buffer. Well, the size of the lot and the setbacks related to the one member of the public that commented, I don't think it matters if the party is inside those lines or outside that lines personally. And I think that the pool for me is far enough aesthetically away from Redwood. And I think that the noise the pool will create is arguably no greater than the noise created by social circumstances in the yard generally, such that I think that I can see it fitting. I know it's tighter quarters than many other properties in Ross, but the circumstances are very different on these small lots, and I think it's reasonable to put a pool there. I very much sympathize with the noise that this yard will generate, being close to that house next door. I don't know. I don't really find that the pool is going to exacerbate that personally. So I can support the project as submitted. I think it would be nice to think of whatever species of hedge is along the south property line, particularly to make sure that it's dense and healthy and vigorous. But otherwise, I can support it as submitted.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Joey?
Well, I'll go last. How about Mark?
Okay, Mark?
He called on you, Joey.
I know, but I've talked so much tonight. I'm giving you a turn.
Boy. All right. Number one, why so many pools in the side yard setback for our committee? I understand, I think as every member does of the committee, that, the desire from the homeowner to have a pool in their property. I think I'm more in line with Dan on this particular proposal. I think while I appreciate the dual frontage, I think there's a way to approach the rear yard, what I would characterize as a redwood side, more sensitively. I think I would approach that as the rear yard. While it has an entrance on that drive, I think if you made some modifications to the poplar facade and in regards to the landscaping, you can draw people to that true front of the home versus the rear yard that happens to have an access point. I think the proximity to the neighbor's home is problematic. I look at this may not be a fair point, but I say the insult to injury is putting the spa right, within 8 feet of the home. I think is unnecessary. I think it is unavoidably difficult to think that is not going to cause significant impact to the home on the southern border. So while I think that there's a way to move this towards the center of the property, I also concur with Dan in saying that wouldn't substantively make this the right proposal either. I think the sound wall on the northern border presents a dual problem, right? With regards to sound bouncing off that wall and emanating back to the southern property. I think that amplifies the problematic nature of this particular piece of property. That doesn't mean I don't appreciate the attempt, but I don't see a spot where, in other projects, we try to move the pool to a location that minimizes the amount of impact. In this particular unusual circumstance, by moving it to the north, I don't think you mitigate that impact to the southern neighbor in any substantive way. So I just don't see a solution. I don't feel as if this particular property supports a pool. I think we have properties in Ross inherently that don't support that kind of development. I happen to own one of them, so I am, my buildable area would be even smaller than yours that you're showing here. And I don't think that it would be appropriate in this particular case to develop a pool in this instance. I think there are ways to balance the property more, and I can support, of course, the components of the barbecue. You're up against a sound wall, so that there's essentially no impact to being in that particular side yard. I think that's, and we have really run up against this in the ADR for the past few months with pools and side yards that have significant neighbor impositions. And in this particular case, I can't see supporting that.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. I'll go next and let Joey be last as per her request. So I agree with the applicants and what Brad said, and I'm just talking about the pool right now as it's a main issue. I never want to penalize a neighbor because their neighbor is within the setbacks and has a non-conforming house. And so the fact that the other house is, let's call it 3 feet from the property line, whatever it is, I would never penalize someone. However, that just means that people are allowed to build up to, but not in the setbacks. So if this was a pool that was 15 or 20 feet away from the property line and not violating the setbacks, and the neighbor said, well, my house is really close to their lot, so their setback should be 30 feet. I would say, well, no, that's not how it works. The setbacks are the setbacks. I would agree with Dan and Mark in this case that the pool is too close to the property line. Not that it's too close to the house, but just too close to the property line. I think that this lot probably doesn't support a pool at all. The only place on this lot that I would think would support a pool would be if you almost did a mirror image of it and put it where the garage and barbecue are in this drawing and switch those, because the neighbors in the office building probably wouldn't care if there was a pool 2 feet away from them or 6 feet away from them. But you know, I have a pool, my neighbors have a pool. For sure, it's the noisiest part of the yard. It's where people are yelling and screaming most and splashing and talking loud in hot tubs, et cetera. That's just how pools are. In regards to the other aspects of the plan with the barbecue, I think that's all fine. I think the fire pit's fine. You know, I think everything is fine except for the swimming pool, which is in the setbacks. If it wasn't in the setbacks, I'd say that was fine. If it was really important, they could put it in the center, but it's obviously not that important because they want the fire pit and the outside deck, et cetera, in the center of their house, which I understand because that's how Jared designed the house. Those are my comments. Joey, to you.
Okay, I first should tell you that I lived for 8 years and raised 3 little kids 3 doors down at number 27 and arrived there in 1992. And kind of knew it was a tiny lot. It would never have a pool. And we had a great life there with 3 little kids and had the plastic pool in our backyard. That said, I can understand the desire for a pool, but you know, those lots on that street trade for a certain number because they don't have a big flat yard where you can support a pool. Our next door neighbors had a lot that was twice the size of ours and they had a pool and it made sense, but there was no way we were ever going to have a pool because our lot was too small. That said, I understand the desire for one, and especially right now, all the public facilities are closed, the clubs are closed. Wouldn't it be nice to have somewhere where you can swim, but not at the expense of being 4 feet away from your neighbor's window? And even if her house were conforming, you'd still be too close. So that's kind of where my general impression of this project. Everything else is fine. I'd love to see the poplar facade be a little softer, a little more inviting to pedestrians. But I know what you really want is the pool. So I always wonder, why do you make the neighbors suffer the pain and put it right up against the property line? Did you ever think of flipping it 90 degrees and shoving it right up against the commercial building? You could maybe apply for a variance for a very tall wall because that's an ugly building. Nobody really cares how tall your wall is there. And change the whole orientation, pull it away from Barbara's house and take more of the pain yourself so that it's in your most prized location. Flip your barbecue and your eating area to the other side of the yard. And you know what? If you have a circuitous route to your back door, so be it. You know, you don't have to have 2 perfect entries that enter straight on. That would be the only way I would even consider this pool, is if it were pulled really far away from the residential neighbors. And I think that putting it between the garage and the house would offer some sort of a sound barrier anyhow. And if you did some kind of the same sort of green wall on Barbara's side, you could really mitigate her exposure and other neighbors' exposure to the sound. You could contain it within your own boundaries. That's where I come out there. I just think it's way too close to the neighbors, and that lot probably doesn't support a pool, but maybe you can figure it out a different way. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Joey. Patrick, did you want to take your vote, or
Mark? Oh, we could do that, but I'm wondering if we've made not a very firm suggestion, but if you talked about and Joey talked about maybe flipping the plan either by reconstructing the garage entirely or by rotating the pool 90 degrees and putting it between the existing garage and the structure. If you wanted to take a casual poll of the entire ADR to see if that would be barking up any possible tree, is that something that some feedback that we could give? Or maybe it's too loose to really respond to, but it could be some valuable feedback for their team to consider.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. Matthew and Patrick, obviously you're going to want your vote on these plans, which we will do shortly. Is there any reason why we could not discuss that briefly?
So go for it.
Okay. Dan, since you were first and spoke about the lot not supporting a pool for many reasons.
Yeah, Mark, I guess my opinion doesn't change. I still think the site is too constrained. I have a similar kind of situation Mark mentioned. My house is around the corner and I have the equivalent of 18 buildable square feet because my setbacks I have no buildable area at all. And these kind of situations occur. And in this particular part of Ross, this was made up of parcels of very small homes, bungalow type homes that, were meant to be, exactly what they are. I think we're trying to cram too much into a very small site. And while I appreciate, the difficulties that it causes a family, in terms of wanting a pool and such, I just don't feel that it's appropriate to the neighborhood. I really don't. And so while I recognize what Joey's saying and Stephen's saying makes sense. If you turn it and you shove it up against the wall, I think that does mitigate it to some extent. But I do think that office building is a real pain. And no matter what noise is created, no matter what you do in terms of a green wall, if you try to do something on the south, there's no question that noise is going to bounce off that office building and go around the neighborhood. It is. I mean, from an acoustical standpoint, you could try to enclose it in some way or to mitigate it, but it's going to be almost impossible to do. So I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's one of these situations where I think a lot could be done to this site. I really do. And I think this is the beginning of really a beautiful plan. I think some nicer gestures to Poplar could be made. I think you could look at the Redwood side of it and make it. I think that actually looks quite good, but there's some additional gestures that could be made to that side so that effectively you have a house with two front yards, which I think quite frankly could be, quite, elegant. So my vote would still be that we don't have a pool on this particular property.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Mark?
Yeah, I don't have a differing opinion than Dan. I think the nature of the lot, I would love to have a second floor in my home. It doesn't fit my lot. It doesn't fit. And that's the burden I bear. So I don't think this, regardless of its orientation and its proximity to that office building on the north, I think that, will exacerbate the sound. And I don't think there's a way to mitigate it, as Dan said. So yeah, unfortunately, I just don't think it supports this lot and just doesn't support this proposal.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And I guess I'm of the idea that I think it could work if it's on the other side against the office building. However, obviously that means switching the garage around, doing that landscape different. That's a whole different proposal that we haven't seen. And I think the applicants and Brad were pretty maybe adamant that they liked the rear entrance from Redwood Drive. That's how they expect people to enter the home. They don't want them to walk around a pool, etc. So, I mean, it's certainly something that I'd look at and I wouldn't rule out. But obviously that changes the way they use and see their house. And Joey obviously commented that she'd be, well, I'll let you say, Joey.
Oh, I do think by treating both as front doors and wanting perfect circulation and you want the straight shot, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot. I actually could support a radically different plan where all of the noise and pain was borne by the office building side. And I actually don't mind the noise and fun of a pool and kids playing and parties. I like that sound, but not 4 feet from someone's bedroom. So, and given that it's just a parking lot over there, I mean, there could be a world in which it could work, a much smaller pool, differently landscaped, but I don't know if they'd ever go for that. It really is a lot that does not support a pool, but if you tried really hard, maybe something could work out on the other side.
Okay, so we've got those comments. Now, Patrick, do you want to take your roll call for the project?
Yeah, I think we have a pretty good idea of what the comments were coming from the ADR group.
Okay.
And then we'll work with the applicant as far as next steps. So I'll just read down the list as I have it. So Buckingham?
No.
Petro?
Yes.
Heine?
No.
Ritz?
No.
Pritchett?
No.
Okay, so the recommendation is denial, 4 votes to 1.
Okay, thank you for the application. Now we'll move on to the communications to staff and advisory design review.
What's that?
Okay, so I'll just quickly remind the ADR group.
Can I clarify one thing?
Sure, please.
If we propose that there's no pool, is the barbecue and arbor and front yard approved?
Yeah, that's what I want to know too. Like, where's that leave the rest of the project?
Yeah, if we pull the pool, what about the patio, the barbecue, the arbor, the front yard improvements? Where are we with all that?
So the staff interpretation of this meeting was that the ADR group was supportive of all the other elements of the design,
Okay.
with the pool included. They would not be supportive, but I would. It's up to the chair whether or not you'd like to take a straw poll, perhaps, to determine whether or not if the pool is if just the pool is removed, if it needs to come back in front of ADR group.
Yeah, we'd like clarification on that.
Yeah,
Sure, yeah, let's do that.
Board.
All right, so I don't think we need to do a formal vote on that. If we can just have feedback from the ADR group.
I would say yes to everything but the pool.
In here.
Okay, so it sounds to me as though if the pool is removed from the project, staff can bring that forward to council for decision on design review, and the ADR group is supportive of the rest of the design, whatever is proposed for that area where the pool had been.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna sign off. Are we good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, Patrick, do you have staff communication before we move on to the minutes?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to mention was, as I previous meetings, let me just mute Brad there. The ADR group is up for reappointment for all 5 positions. So we are accepting applications through July 31st. At that point, we will either go directly to the council meeting, which is scheduled for August 13th, for appointments to the ADR group, or as what happened last time, we may hold interview sessions probably sometime during the first week of August in order to have the council weigh in on the recommendation going forward to that appointment at the August 13th meeting. So the applications are available on the website at the ADR group webpage on the town's website. And as I mentioned, we are accepting applications through July 31st.
Oh, and just so you're all aware, the application hasn't changed. So you can literally just turn in your old application again, unless you've changed dramatically.
I've changed.
Hey, Mark, have you submitted yours yet? Both Marks.
Which I have not.
I sent in my old one.
I'm not sure I still have an old one to submit. Yeah, just are people thinking about, I mean, we have in the past talked about new blood on the committee, and some of us have been here for a long time.
I resubmitted with a letter that said I would very much welcome new blood and I would have no hurt feelings if I were not selected. It was something I do more out of civic duty in case there's not enough people applying, and I don't think it's a hot ticket. But I'm really happy to have someone else take my place if there's someone that is preferred. I just sent it in, and I'll be happy to serve if I'm needed, basically.
See, Joey did it the right way. She wrote this really nice letter. I basically submitted the application with one line that I've been doing this from the beginning. I'm pleased to do it again.
Please don't choose me.
If there's somebody else that really wants to do this, I'm more than happy to back out. But, it's like, it's one of these things, guys, where I don't know. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation that we've all had because we all have different opinions about things, which I think is really, really valuable. And you guys all bring insight to the process that I think is especially valuable to the people that are bringing their applications forward. So as hard as this job is, and it is hard, it's difficult. Tonight is not easy. Things like this aren't easy, but I do think there's value to both the residents of Ross and the town itself. And so, if there's some things that we all can do or I can do, I'll do it. And if there's somebody who really wants to get involved and bring fresh, eyes to this process, I think that's a good thing too.
More pools in the setback.
Well, I think you can all see, several of you mentioned the house on Bolinas, the Shuey residence. And in my opinion, that looks horrible, the frontage there. So I think that the job that you all do with your comments and improvements do make the town a more appealing place aesthetically. Because you'd hate to see every project look like that at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Or look if the Tracy job went forward as originally proposed, but geez, you literally, I laugh with my family that every month I make 3 new enemies. All these young families hate me. They literally see me in the store and hate me. So.
Yeah, Joey, that's true, but the fact of the matter is that somebody has to do this, right? And I don't think it's any different than serving, on town council or serving in government or serving, even in nonprofits and such, that I think that, people have to do these things, and it's always not an easy thing to do. And it's not, it's not like you can ever have complete an agreement. And it's not like we don't make mistakes, folks, right? I mean, I see our mistakes all the time. I walk through the town, I see our mistakes all the time. I see them probably, you guys do too. And I feel them probably more than most neighbors would ever feel them. But on the other hand, when something really good happens, there's some really rewarding aspects of that.
Look at the modern house on Woodside. I do think that was one of our better interventions. I think it turned out really well. The 1-story one with the green roof. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I feel like this is one skill I can offer to the town. Maybe skill, not talent, but something I know something about. And I'm happy to serve if I'm needed, but I really am super happy if someone else is picked.
Patrick, is it appropriate to ask, or have there been a number of applicants outside of the current ADR group?
We have gotten a few.
Okay, good. Okay.
We haven't gotten any design professional applications as of yet. And there's also been a lot of interest, people, asking questions. So I do anticipate we might get a couple more before the deadline comes.
I would I would encourage anyone who you think would benefit from it to have conversations with any of the ADR members to understand the scope or to understand the level of commitment, et cetera. I can speak for myself. I'd be happy to have conversations with folks who are curious.
That's good to know. I'll definitely let them know that the ADR group current members are a good resource to figure out what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
I'll have to tell you guys though, so now like a side story, you guys know that I'm in the midst of doing this historic renovation in Bend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's on the National Historic Register. I can tell you guys, you have no idea. They wanted the last applicant who's renovating a house up the block. We were told they wanted them to reuse the nails that were pulled out of the house because they were original to the house.
Nice.
Oh,
Jesus Christ.
We're not allowed to put any double pane windows. Everything's got to be single pane. They have to be hang-on storms. It's got to be restored back to its original condition. It is a completely different animal. And I've got to raise the house up and redo the foundations. And they're volcanic rock. Literally the house is sitting on rock. So I have to build a foundation. I've got to do full thickness volcanic rock. So I have to cantilever the whole house to be able to take full rock and put it on the face of the new foundation.
that's pretty amazing. I mean, we could definitely chat about things. We have situations like the one on Bolinas where that first floor was actually a garage and it was converted into living space at some point or another. And then, shocker, it floods because it's at grade. And then we're all of a sudden jacking up living space that was never living space and having a profile of a very tall building just going up 5 feet in the air. It's just it's be careful. All the decisions we make are going to affect this same group 30 years from now.
That was a lively discussion with my my bit of staff communications.
Yeah, I know. We used to, Patrick, have these little chats after our physical meetings.
On the way to the cars, not
on the way to the cars. Everybody would leave and we'd kind of chat out in front, and now we don't really have the opportunity to do so anymore.
Well, if everyone wants to stay on, I can keep the Zoom meeting going, but after we stop recording for the public. So
okay.
I recommended this.
So let's see. So we have two different approval of minutes. We have the June 4th. I would motion that we accept the June 4th minutes unless someone has an objection.
None here.
None here.
Okay. So let's accept those. And
Yep.
then
Yep.
for the June 16th, I was also okay with those. Is everyone okay with those?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So we've approved both of those. And now we can adjourn officially.
When's our next meeting, everybody?
When is it? Let's see.
18th of August?
18.
August 18th.